The other part of this conversation that I want to have, that I'm sure lots of people are going to be really mad at me for saying this, but like, it's important and it's true. So I think it's a necessary conversation for us to have, even if it means you guys leave me mean comments. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name is Mickey. I'm a therapist, and we talk about therapist-y things on this channel. Today we are talking about family vlogging because our lovely friends on the Patreon have picked this as our monthly patrons pick. Shout out to all of the patrons. Love you the most. And if you want to become a patron, the link to do that is in the description, where you get to vote on polls for video topics, but also do like a whole host of other fun things. Our podcast is there. You get it. Link to that in the description if you want to join. So we are talking about family vlogging because I think there is a lot of moral and ethical gray area here for us to explore. And I want to talk about a little bit of the like developmental mental health concerns that come along with this phenomenon. So like, it's a lot. Like, we're unpacking a lot today. Stick with me. As a quick caveat before we get into things, I do want to be super clear. I recognize, like I said, literally just now, there's a lot of moral and ethical gray area here. And so I want to be conscious to not character assassinate creators or like content consumers. If this is content that you watch and you enjoy it, or you're a person who creates this content, like, please know that I'm not coming for anyone specifically, and I'm certainly not speaking about anyone's like personhood ever. That's a goal that we have on the channel, to not like lump up somebody's worthiness as a human being with their behaviors. I want to dissect this phenomenon for the purpose of talking about the potential harmful ramifications of the behavior, and to sort of like offer some alternative courses of action if you're a person who finds this type of content upsetting, repugnant, you know, not for you, those type of things. So like, as always, this is meant to be like educational, informative, like entertainment, I guess, to a certain degree, but certainly this is not a replacement for therapy. And again, this is not meant to speak to any one person in particular, which actually is another thing really quickly before we get into it. I'm going to intentionally not name drop anybody in the comments. I know that there is a lot of discussion about particular creators, and I know that a lot of you have asked me to discuss people in particular. Personally, I find this to be more harmful than it is helpful. The reality is that a lot of the children who are being harmed by this type of content creation, for better or for worse, their legal guardians are the people that are inflicting that potential harm. And I have no ability to remove those children. And like, again, moral and ethical gray area about whether those children should be removed in the first place. And so calling attention to the family and like using the internet as like a sort of echo chamber of like yelling at people in particular, in my opinion, is not always helpful, especially when there are minors involved who have no ability to like make decisions for themselves. And I'm just not interested in leveraging my platform to like funnel a whole group of my followers to like shit on someone else for the purpose of like white knighting. We're gonna get into it. I'm not leveraging my platform to try and send hate to anyone ever, but especially in this scenario because there are minors involved. So take that for what you will. I'm sorry that might be disappointing to some of you, but it is what it is. That said, let's talk about like, what is family vlogging generally, in case you don't know. I'm gonna give you like a brief rundown of what that means, and then we're gonna talk about some of the risks and all of that in a second. Okay, so mom blogs generally have existed on the internet in some form, like since the internet was a thing that we were like using for social purposes. And those all have their own, again, like issues with like moral and ethical stuff on their own. But the thing that we're talking about is the sort of evolution of mom blogs, where things evolved past the point of like text posting and like just being a sort of like text and picture based blog, all the way up to daily family vlogging, where families and like typically parents are the ones who are making these daily videos where they chronicle like what, you know, like a day in our life and like what we do as a family of X amount of children and whatever. We are also talking about this as it relates to other social media platforms though. I'm not talking specifically about YouTube. This is also a phenomenon that exists in other places like Instagram and TikTok, especially with the advent of TikToks and Reels. So please know that this doesn't only extend to people who are like daily vloggers. It's like generally the idea of putting your children on the internet for the sake of making content, but also for the sake of making content as your career. So let's talk about some of the risks that are associated with this. I think there are a couple that are fairly obvious to most folks, and there was a scandal on TikTok recently, or like some controversy on TikTok recently with a particular creator surrounding the type of people who follow religiously this like daily vlogging content of small children. I think it goes without saying that that is a concern, that the people who are following that content may be people who have ill intentions or are following with like malintent. This, in my opinion, is reason enough to limit the amount of exposure that strangers have to your child. But like I said, I think this is like the more obvious concern, and I wanted to talk about some of the potentially less obvious ones. One of the other concerns that's really important for us to discuss here is the like identity theft and or like security issues. It's a common thing for creators who, you know, name their children and put their children on the internet from the time that they're like a sonogram picture, for those children to have fan accounts, and for people to make Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and like other accounts with those children's names. We know this is a well-documented phenomenon that we all now have like a digital fingerprint, essentially. Because our lives are so irrevocably intertwined with the internet, we all develop our own like online and digital presence in some way. And so there is a security and a safety issue with these children not being able to claim their own digital footprint or like fingerprint because strangers are doing it for them. And I think that begs some further discussion about like what that means 10 or 20 years from now when that child tries to apply to college or tries to apply for a job or tries to get on Tinder, knowing full well that there are other accounts out there just floating around on the internet that have their name, their photos, their likeness, and a lot of like really personal details about them that they can't really control to what degree that's being exposed or disseminated on the internet. Like, this is a problem. And the other concern with this is that the internet is forever. We know this as adults, and it's something that we have to make responsible and conscientious decisions about because it's very difficult to permanently wipe something off the internet. But that said, like when you're a child and you don't have the cognitive ability to understand the permanence of the internet, and someone else like a caregiver is making the decision to publicize details about your life for you, we run into like some informed consent issues here about, again, like very personal private details about a human being being put on the internet potentially forevermore for like, again, any number of different like audiences or institutions to do what they will with. Especially when we talk about things like tantrums and like emotional moments, this is like kind of an invasion of privacy issue because I mean, like, there's a reason that you guys don't see me on the internet when I'm having like a fucking meltdown or I'm having a panic attack, because it's a deeply personal moment and not something that I'd prefer to publicize to the entire world to do whatever they'd like to with that. The fact that like these moments are being publicized for small children, and again in like this very permanent way, leads us again, I think, to some like very necessary and relevant discussion about to what degree that's like ethical or safe for kids. I think this also goes along with some of the parasocial issues that are present with strangers being obsessed with your children. We talked about this a little bit in regards to like the fan accounts that can pop up for small children and things like that. But this is also like a well-documented phenomenon for influencers who have done the daily vlogging thing of their kids. One in particular that I can think of where they spoke publicly about their need to move house, change schools, and like kind of interrupt their lives in like a very central and like basic way, or like a very, like at the core level, they had to uproot their life to protect the privacy of their children because someone who found their content online showed up at the school for the children and was like trying to speak to the children there. Like, this is what I'm talking about. I think we're all also like pretty well aware that people like Jenna Marbles and other influencers have spoken about how unnerving it is to have strangers show up at your home and know your name and want to talk to you and your pets and your family and like discuss these details of your life when you don't know this person. This is like an issue with parasocial relationships generally, but something that, like consenting adults who've willfully made the choice to share their lives with the internet have to deal with because it's a conscientious choice that we've made, right? Children who don't have that ability, like, this can be very confusing and very overwhelming for a small child who, like, again, doesn't have the object permanence to fully and appropriately understand what the fuck the internet is, but also why strangers might know your name and why those people, even though they know your name and they know lots of details about your life, still aren't safe people for you to be speaking to. It's a very complex and difficult conversation to have with a small child. And again, like in this type of content creation, I think this begs the question about whether these types of conversations are being had with these children at all, and like whether they need to. And so, like, just generally speaking, this type of content creation lends itself to a lot of safety and privacy concerns. Another thing that I wanted to address here, like specifically from the mental health and like cognitive development point of view, is what it does to a person to be raised with a fundamental lack of privacy. It's a well-documented phenomenon, again, in this type of content creation, that these videos, like this style of family vlogging, tends to be a self-perpetuating machine, in that once you're sort of in this niche of like, we make family vlogging content, it's very difficult to pivot away from that, because that's what your audience wants. That's what the analytics inform people are coming back for. And so should your child then voice, when they're like a adolescent or teen or whatever, I don't want to do this anymore, I don't want to be on camera, I am bothered by my lack of privacy, how do you as a parent or a caregiver then approach this? Because your living and your ability to be home with your kids, to be present with your kids, in theory, to provide for your children and to like provide financial stability and security, is wrapped up in your need to violate their right to privacy. Like, this is a problem. And I think, again, like, this is something that is a conversation that's maybe not being had by the folks who are full-time making this type of content. And so this then, leads us to a conversation about like, what does it do to a person to grow up with this lack of right to privacy? It's a difficult thing for us to quantify necessarily, because family vlogging as like a specific phenomenon is relatively new. We don't have a lot of robust data about how this impacts people. And also the people who are doing this aren't necessarily interested in volunteering their children to participate in randomized controlled trial studies about the impacts of this on their child's cognitive development. So it's kind of a difficult thing to measure. However, we do have data about what a lack of privacy in a home does to children's cognitive development, particularly when children grow up in poverty, or when children, through circumstances outside of their control, aren't able to live in a home where they have their own room, for example, or where there's a lot of shared space out of necessity. So we can see from this research that particularly the lack of privacy aspect is a risk factor for developing mental illness, and we know that this negatively impacts people's mental health. There doesn't appear to be a clear link between a lack of privacy and cognitive development, meaning that in the research that we have, it doesn't appear that the brain is impeded from developing normally just through having a lack of privacy, but we do know that it puts the person at an increased risk for developing mental illness later in life. If you are at all familiar with the ACE study, I will link that in the description, and I'll put a little thing up here somewhere. The ACE study documents a number of different factors that can influence a person's risk for developing mental illness later in life. And this specifically is not an ACE. I want to be clear. I'm not stating that, but we do have like data about like what it means when a person is exposed repeatedly to certain stimuli that are risk factors. And the risk continues to compound with the more risk factors that a person has in childhood. So this is not something to play around with, I guess, is what I'm getting at. The last thing that I wanted to touch on here that I think is really important for us to unpack is that children fundamentally lack the cognitive structure and ability to understand what family vlogging is. At the time that these children are being filmed and having that content uploaded to the internet for the entertainment and consumption of strangers, they're unable to fully conceptualize, first of all, what the fuck the internet is. Children lack object permanence until they're around 8 months old or so. We have some research to suggest that it might be slightly earlier than that, but regardless, children don't develop a sense of like concrete object permanence until they're around 8 months old ish. And this is also like in the like very like physical sense. So like when you play peekaboo with a little baby and you hide behind your hands and they are like, oh my god, where did mom go? That's because they have no object permanence. They don't understand that you're just hiding behind your hands. But symbolic and like metaphorical object permanence is a lot more difficult thing to explain to small children. If you've ever tried to reason with a 2-year-old that somebody is, I promise, coming back, you'll understand what I'm talking about. It's very difficult to explain like conceptual object permanence to a small child, especially in regards to the internet, because they may understand that like your phone as a physical object, for example, is an object that if you put it in your pocket, it's still in there and it's coming back. But it's difficult to explain that there are people on the other side of the phone, even though they're not on the other side of the phone or on the other side of the camera. A common phrase that small children say when seeing people on FaceTime is like, why are they in there? Because it's difficult for them to understand like what it exactly is that's going on. This is a very important thing for us to acknowledge about this type of content creation, because not only is it difficult for children to understand that like when you FaceTime with grandma, like grandma is not inside the phone, she's just like somewhere else and you're seeing her through like magic electronic mumbo jumbo, but also that there are people that you have never met, that who you will never meet, you will never know their names, you will never interact with them who are watching this content and who are getting a front row seat to your life. This is kind of a heady concept for like adults to deal with because we have the tendency to sort of like compartmentalize and like, push stuff away when it doesn't make sense. And so like, especially explaining this to a small child is a very difficult thing. The issue that a lot of folks have is that by the time a child develops the cognitive ability to appropriately and fully consent to this activity, it's too late. So much of this content has already been uploaded to the internet permanently for all intents and purposes, and there's no taking it back. So there is like a violation of privacy and like a violation of boundaries that children might experience. And like I said, the like family vlogging institution is somewhat new, but we know this to be true about child stars and people who have grown up in the entertainment industry. I have an article that I will link down below that speaks about the negative impact specifically for women, people with vulvas, people affected by misogyny, and like in that sort of realm. Those people have spoken about how violating it can feel to have your existence sexualized before you were even a sexual being. And so those types of issues are still very much prevalent in the family vlogging world. Okay, so I want to be clear, this is not like an exhaustive list of all of the things that are potential risks or negative outcomes of family vlogging. Obviously, there are a lot. And I wanted to sort of like briefly outline them for you guys because I think it's important. But I also wanted to host a conversation about the sort of like broader issue that's at hand here, because this is one of those issues I think that doesn't exist in a like black or white realm. This is not a like this or that issue where not recording your kids is good and recording your kids is bad always. There are lots of benefits that families have spoken about in terms of like recording their lives because it allows them to preserve memories with their kids and things like that. And there also is a spectrum. The like full-on family vlogging content where parents are coaching their kid to like cry again, that's a real thing, by the way. I will link that article in the description. It's very different than like, for example, a parent who sometimes records interactions with their kids for the purpose of informing other parents about gentle parenting, right? Like, I think it's fair to say that like morally and ethically, those two types of content creation feel different. This is an important nuance for us to recognize because some parents make the choice to never upload their child's face, their child's life, their like child in any capacity on the internet, especially like creators who make content in a different realm and just so happen to be parents. This is a common decision that's being made nowadays, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only right way to be a parent. And again, like there's just a lot of moral and ethical gray area here, which it feels important for us to honor. The other part of this conversation that I want to have that I'm sure lots of people are going to be really fucking mad at me for saying this, but like it's important and it's true. So I think it's a necessary conversation for us to have, even if it means you guys leave me mean comments, which is that regardless of how you feel about the institution of family vlogging content, the reality is that we're not their parents. Like we as consumers of content on the internet are not the parents of these children who are being filmed and uploaded to the internet. And so therefore there is a limit to what we are able to do. Like there's a limit to the change that we can affect as merely bystanders or like, consumers of this content. I think that's very important for us to honor and talk about because especially on the internet with the parasocial issues that happen, it's very easy to get sucked into this trap of like, if I, pass by this video and I don't leave a comment, I'm not doing the right thing. Or if I don't participate in this like larger rhetoric of like condemning these particular parents, that means I'm not doing my due diligence, or I'm not doing the right thing, or I'm not doing enough. But the reality, unfortunately, is that especially for parents who have committed to family vlogging and uploading their children without their consent as a lifestyle or as their career, there's very little that you can really say that these people will actually hear. It's literally a meme now. Like people make meme content of this on TikTok about how it doesn't matter if you leave comments on a live or on someone's comment section. These parents are committed to this worldview and they're not interested in what you have to say. And again, the unfortunate reality is that you also are not able to force these parents to make different decisions because the way that the laws are structured in the United States, unless that parent significantly loses some portion of their rights or runs into some like legal trouble, they're the person who is making the decisions about this child's well-being. Like the legal system is set up in such a way that parents and guardians have final say-so about what is safe or right for their child, within reason, obviously. But this is a very new area in some ways that has like yet to be legislated about. And so like simply leaving a comment or like saying something shitty about it on the internet doesn't actually help anyone. That's the reason that I chose to not name creators specifically, because I am very, very hesitant to do that for fear that people watching this video will then brigade those comment sections in an effort to get this parent to take their content down. Now, please don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that the solution to this is to just like fuck off and say nothing and do nothing and just like let it all drive each their own. Like, that's not at all what I'm insinuating. But I do think it's important to honor that the potential course of action that we want to take might result in no change at all. And that's a very important discomfort for us to make peace with as human beings, because again, we have no fundamental control over what anybody does, but especially over what parents do with their own children, or what decisions they're making about the digital safety and well-being of their children. That said, there are things that you can do to participate in like somewhat of a productive and positive change. Chief among them, or like most important in my opinion, is to stop fucking consuming the content. We talked about this a little bit with the Gabby Hanna video, where I said I'm addressing this once for the sake of educating and providing some evidence-based information about the situation broadly. But after this moment, I'm done talking about it. And that is because talking about it and making more videos and more content, and like making a thing of it, perpetuates the issue. This is an issue that's come up with the fundamentalism content too. That's important for us to find this line of like, to what degree am I becoming a part of the problem by adding another video to this hashtag or to this algorithm, you know, further sensationalizing family vlogging and like child content on the internet. And to what degree am I like actually educating people about it? In my opinion, especially as like everyday content consumers, if this content really does bother you, one of the most helpful things that you can do is block the creators who are creating it and to stop fucking consuming that content. It's a hard thing to do, especially because human nature, like we are just curious and like interested to know. And also, especially for people who have a really strong emotional reaction. I know this happens a lot for people who have their own children and feel strongly about the well-being and the safety of small children. It's hard to like turn a blind eye and to stop talking about it and to feel like, but if I don't talk about it, I'm doing nothing. But again, I want to encourage folks to evaluate to what degree are the actions that you're taking on your own, like, you know, digital fingerprint contributing to and or like helping to eliminate the problem. I also wanted to call attention to some folks' efforts to push legislation about this issue. If this is something that is genuinely upsetting and hurtful and frustrating to you, I would encourage you to explore what resources you have. I will link some things in the description if I can find them. A lot of them are organized at the local level, and I am not going to list every single petition that I can find for every city and every state and every country ever. But if I can find like a sort of broad strokes one that will apply to most people watching this video, I will link that. But participating in broader change about laws regarding child welfare is a great way to become involved in creating positive change here. But I do very much want to encourage folks to shy away from labeling parents individually as terrible fucking human beings who are like abusing their children, because while that may be true in some cases, sure, again, I think it begs the question about whether that's actually helpful, whether that person will actually see that comment or like statement, and whether they're in a place to actually absorb that and like really make meaningful changes as a result of that anyways. Again, I want to be super clear. I know that people are going to be fucking mad about this. That's valid. You're allowed to feel how you feel. I'm making the choice to upload this video anyways, knowing full well that people are going to have strong reactions to that, and that's okay. I'm also very much open to the idea that there is a part of this conversation that I have missed, or that I've missed the mark on. And so I do want to encourage folks to like air that out in the comment section. If that feels important to you, please, you know, do your best to like be respectful and kind. But again, I want this channel to be a space where we're able to have productive and helpful and open dialogue about these issues, because again, this is a moral and ethical gray area in my opinion. And so I am open to hearing what y'all have to say and how you feel and what you think. And I would encourage you guys to do the same with one another. Again, I do just really want to stress that this issue is not a question of how we can force other people to take accountability for their actions, but rather how we can focus in on ourselves, which is ultimately the only thing that we really can control. How can we hold ourselves accountable for the actions that we're taking and the behavior that we have on the internet at large to create a positive change, and to participate in like positive forward movement. I am very curious to hear what y'all have to say. If you did like the video, subscribe to the channel. We talk about stuff like this. We also do like a cute therapist react moment that's like a little bit lighter every now and again. So I'd love to have you stay and share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow. And I will see you guys for the next one next Saturday. Okay, bye.